The laughter slowly faded, not because anyone had told them to stop, but because the sound no longer felt appropriate. The engine room changed its tone, the deep mechanical hum settling into a smoother, steadier rhythm. Gauges that had flickered nervously began to stabilize. One warning light blinked, then went dark. Another followed. A silence spread that felt heavier than the noise before it. The officers stared at the control panel as if it had betrayed them. Someone cleared his throat. Another took a cautious step closer to the engine, checking readings he had memorized by heart. Everything was normal, better than normal. The young woman withdrew her hand and opened her eyes. "What did you do?" a lieutenant asked, unable to hide his disbelief. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she listened again, head slightly tilted, as if the engine was still speaking and she was making sure it had finished its sentence. Only then did she turn. "The intake synchronization was off by a fraction," she said calmly. "The system compensated by choking itself. You were following procedure, but the engine wasn't designed for textbook conditions." One of the engineers frowned. "That adjustment isn't in the manual." She nodded. "That's why it works." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some officers looked irritated, others unsettled. The captain, a tall man with silver at his temples, stepped forward. His voice carried authority, but also restraint. "And you are?" he asked. She met his gaze without hesitation. "Commander Alara Voss." The name landed like a dropped tool on metal. A few officers stiffened. One's face drained of color. The captain's eyes widened just enough to reveal surprise before discipline snapped back into place. "The propulsion systems commander?" he asked. "Yes, sir." The room moved as one. Backs straightened. Salutes rose sharply into the air. The earlier laughter echoed in memory now, sharp and embarrassing. Alara returned the salute, her expression unchanged. "I wasn't informed you'd be joining us today," the captain said carefully. "You were informed," she replied. "You dismissed the notice as an administrative error." Silence again, this time uncomfortable. She turned back toward the engine. This ship was scheduled to depart 43 minutes ago. Every minute of delay compounds risk across the entire operation. One officer swallowed. "The engineers said." "I know what they said," she interrupted, not unkindly. "And they were competent. But competence isn't always enough." She gestured toward the engine. "This system was retrofitted after the last deployment. The software assumes ideal pressure conditions that don't exist in this climate." The engine wasn't failing. It was resisting. Resisting. Someone repeated. "Yes," she said. "Machines do that when we stop listening." The captain studied her for a long moment. "You touched the engine without authorization." She turned to face him fully. "I am the authorization." A beat passed. Then he nodded once. "Understood, Commander." She exhaled softly, as if only now allowing herself to relax. "Run a full diagnostic sweep. You'll find the fluctuation is gone. Then prepare for departure." The officers moved quickly, efficiency replacing doubt. As systems confirmed stability, whispers followed her through the room. The girl they had laughed at had vanished, replaced by something sharper, heavier, undeniable. As the warship finally rumbled to life, Alara stepped aside, watching the engine with quiet focus. One of the younger officers hesitated before approaching her. "Commander," he said, voice low. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you know?" She considered the question. "Because I've made the same mistake you did." He frowned. "You laughed at someone." She shook her head. "No, I trusted rules more than reality." She looked around the engine room, the heat, the noise, the people. "When I was a cadet, I froze during a systems failure. I followed every protocol perfectly. The ship still lost power. An old technician fixed it with a single adjustment I'd ignored because it wasn't written anywhere. I never forgot that." The officer nodded slowly. Later, on the bridge, the captain stood beside her as the warship cut through the water. "You surprised my crew," he said. "That wasn't my intention. Still," he continued, "you might consider announcing yourself next time." She looked out at the horizon. Respect given too easily doesn't last. I prefer to earn attention the same way problems are solved, by doing the work. He smiled faintly. You certainly did. As the ship moved forward, steady and powerful, Alara allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Not because she had proven anyone wrong, but because the engine was running the way it should, heard, understood, and trusted. And somewhere deep within the steel heart of the warship, the rhythm held true, carrying them all forward, no laughter left behind. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the steady, confident hum of the engine. It no longer sounded strained or hesitant. It sounded alive, disciplined, obedient. The kind of sound that told sailors they would make it home. The captain lowered his hand from the salute last, his expression unreadable. Around him, officers avoided looking at one another, each replaying the laughter from minutes earlier in their minds. Alara Voss, the captain said slowly, testing the name as if it carried weight he could now feel. Youngest naval commander. That file crossed my desk years ago. She nodded once. I was hoping it wouldn't be necessary to remind anyone. You could have announced yourself, an officer said before he could stop himself. She turned to him, not sharply, not gently, just directly. And you would have listened before the engine failed. The officer opened his mouth, then closed it. The answer was clear. She stepped toward the control panel again, her presence commanding without volume. Rank exists to establish responsibility, not ego. If this engine had shut down at sea, the paperwork would have been irrelevant. One of the engineers swallowed. We followed protocol. I know, she said. That's why I didn't stop you. They looked confused. Protocols are maps, she continued. Not terrain. You don't argue with the ocean because the map says it should be calm. She removed her jacket and set it aside, rolling up her sleeves. The simple gesture carried authority. This engine was recalibrated after its last mission. Whoever signed off on it assumed perfect conditions. Heat, humidity, pressure variance, none of that was accounted for. She adjusted another control slightly, then stepped back. The engine responded instantly, smoother still. The captain watched closely. You didn't just fix it. You anticipated the next failure. She met his gaze. I don't like surprises. A quiet laugh escaped someone in the back, more nervous than amused. No one joined in. The captain exhaled. Commander, I owe you an apology. And so does my crew. You owe me nothing, she replied. But the ship deserves better than assumptions. He nodded. You'll have full access to propulsion systems from now on. I already did, she said, then softened slightly. But thank you. As the officers dispersed to their stations, the room slowly returned to motion. Yet something fundamental had shifted. Conversations were quieter. Instructions were clearer. No one laughed. An older chief engineer approached her cautiously. His hair was gray, his hands scarred by decades of work. I've been listening to engines longer than you've been alive, he said. You hear things most don't. She smiled faintly. Because I was taught by people like you. He blinked, surprised. Then why hide your rank? I don't hide, she replied. I observe. The ship finally began its departure sequence. The deep vibration traveled through the deck, steady and sure. From the bridge, the horizon opened wide, blue and endless. The captain stood beside her again. You know they'll talk about this. They should, she said. But not because of me. He glanced at her. Because of what? Because today reminded them that authority doesn't always look the way they expect. He studied her profile, young yet composed beyond years. You've dealt with this before. Yes, she said quietly. Does it get easier? No, she replied. But it gets clearer. A junior officer nearby hesitated before speaking. Commander, why didn't you correct them when they laughed? She considered the question carefully. Because respect forced is temporary. Respect earned changes behavior. The officer nodded, absorbing the lesson. As the warship cut cleanly through the waves, the engine below held its rhythm, powerful and unwavering. Alara stood silently, hands resting lightly at her sides, listening, not for problems, but for balance. Behind her, the officers who had laughed now watched with something new in their eyes. Not embarrassment alone, but understanding. They had mistaken quiet for weakness, youth for inexperience, a woman for someone less. And the engine, restored and trusted once more, had taught them otherwise.